Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for letting me share my thoughts with the Tableau Print Festival EMEA community. My name is Elena Hristozova, and I will be talking to you about Tableau's layered containers, try and pass on some wisdom that I've discovered maybe the hard way. Let's quickly move on. Actually, let me just try to minimize this. I'll put it on the side. Sorry, guys, I'll try and hide you a little bit. Great. So a few words about me very, very quickly. My name is Elena Hristozova. Here are all my details where you can follow me on social media. I'm currently based in Nottingham in the United Kingdom, working at the University of Nottingham, and I've been using Tableau since January 2015, so that's just over 3 years now. In the community, you can see me as a regular attendee of the Midlands Tableau user group. Sometimes I pop over to Birmingham as well, to the Birmingham event. And I also try to organize a Midlands UG, so that's where you can also find me if in real life. Right, so about this session, what I wanted to do is I wanted to give you 3 tips on, or to explain how Tableau layered containers work. And what people might find a little bit tricky and why they might find them a little bit tricky to use. I certainly did so for probably more than a year until I started becoming a little bit more comfortable with them. So it's more about I'll give you 3 tips, explain 3 tricky areas, and then point you to some, so obviously tell you how maybe you might want to be careful dealing with them, and then not fall into kind of the pitfalls, and point you to some resources that are available online already. So please know this is not to show you how to push boundaries or some really extremely clever users of containers. There's so many blog posts out there that you can read about, and I will also not be going through everything in kind of the very, very basic details, but you can always ask me more questions later. I will be focusing on using non-floating objects. So in my organizations, we tend to use like A4 landscape type dashboards. So I have adopted this practice in my work and everyday style. So if you're a huge fan of floating, maybe you can find some, you might not find this session very, very useful, but you never know, you might see something helpful anyway. So just bear with me. And if you have questions, please use the Q&A box, not the chat, because it'll help me and it'll have all the other presenters go back to the questions in kind of proper order and make sure we don't miss your questions. So please remember that. And the details, I'll be using version 10.5.1, and I'll be using charts. The charts are meaningless, they're just literally there for space utilization in the layout containers, and they're from Tableau's use of store data. And this presentation will go on my Tableau public profile. So the basics, let's just cover the basics. What is a layout container? You can all go and read on the online Tableau help pages how they define it. But when I was doing a little bit of research for this presentation, I came across a really interesting blog post, very simple, but I quite like Tiffany Spalding from Interworks. The definition, short and a very brief blog post, in saying layered containers for spatial relationships between dashboard components, and spatial relationship is what I want for us to focus on. And conceptually, they allow the dashboard designer to format common elements, move multiple dashboards and objects at the same time. So literally, this is what this talk is all about. So what are the layered containers? What are the options we've got? Well, as you can see, I'm just going to show that. That's what we can see in default. The options for layered containers, we can see them down here in the bottom left corner, and they're horizontal or vertical. And just because they list as the objects, they are also treated as any other object in the that we can bring into a Tableau dashboard, and they can also be tiled on floating. So as I said, I'll be focusing on the kind of tiled, or what I call them, non-floating or nested in a hierarchical style object. And when are they useful? There are many, many cases when they're useful. Just a few examples. One for me, they're using layered containers and making sure I'm quite careful with them and how exactly I arrange them. When I want to do some formatting, so bring in certain elements of my dashboard together to highlight sections. When you're doing show and hide, you know, the show and hide trick, whether you're using the click version with an action filter, whether you're using the parameter driven control, it's one or the other. And when I want to make sure that when the automatic dashboard, which is set on automatically to scale out and in depending on the size of the viewer screen, when I want to make sure that it's kind of resize proofed and they all resize in the same way. So just to give a very quick example, this is something I put together. It's very, very basic. But as I said, formatting here, for example, I have brought in all of my 3 filters together. And if I just click outside of the space, you can see I've bordered them around. There is a nice little line. Some people might not be fans of lines, that's entirely up to you, but I like to kind of segment and make things clear where they are. And here we've got the chart. If I click, I'm using the action filter to show and hide maps. And as you can see, with the classical action filter, because my object's in a container, which again I'm going to show in a little bit, my main chart, my main bar chart collapse and expands based on what happens underneath. Another example, which is this is another example on my Tableau public profile, something I have done. I did a few, probably a month or so ago, and again, this is showing my way of using containers. There we go, an error occurred processing the server response. Sorry about that, guys. But even though it's a little bit shaded, you can see I've got again some kind of pointer areas on the top, and I'm using containers to again highlight the separate sections of my chart. Moving on swiftly. So the first tip I want to give you is how to use layout containers. And one of the main things is familiarize yourself with the layout structure section. Where is that? I can't remember if it's 10.3 or if it's 10.4 when it first got introduced, but it's right here on the left-hand side where we used to have all of the, well, where all of the sheets are and all of the objects are. If you click on the layout section, this is the area where I'm using a lot. And so that's where you can find it. And the item hierarchy, this is really the place where you need to pay attention to. As you can see, I can start expanding, I can start collapsing areas, and you can start seeing how things, so these are my objects, and there is a little image for each one of them. This is a text box, this is an image, and these are the containers, and you can see how you can expand them. You can also see where things are and how they're nested. So notice the top two ones. There is a tiled one, which is why I don't like the word tile. I tend to use floating and non-floating, whether they're free arranged or whether they're nested, because there is a container called tiled, and we don't seem to be able to bring that in. It appears somehow, and this is part of the kind of little things that are happening in the background as we're moving things around the dashboard. So pay attention to this one. It does appear. It is one of the kind of tricky ones. But then after that, you can see everything is quite straightforward. We have a vertical container, horizontal, and because I use a really weird color, like this really dark green, which I quite liked yesterday when I started formatting my entire presentation, I'm going to move on to an example which is exactly the same examples from a few minutes ago. As I'm clicking around, you will start seeing properly how the objects get highlighted. So as I click on the tiled container, this is on the very, very top, and that highlights everything. So this puts this border all the way around. We have a vertical, which is right inside it. Then we have the title. Then we have another horizontal container, which is where all my filters are. So you can see the pattern here. So just play around with this. In every dashboard you've got, just keep clicking to select and to see how the objects are and where exactly they're positioned. And one thing I wanted to also show you here is draw attention to is keep an eye on kind of how much they're indented, because as you can see here, we've got these three objects. Well, these three objects, one of them is a title, one of them is a horizontal, and one of them is a vertical container, and they're all vertically aligned in kind of the same amount of indentation from left to right. So that means they're kind of all equally kind of valid in that space available into this vertical container. These ones are then nested within this one. So again, straightforward, but some people just don't pay attention to that, and then you just wonder where your objects have gone and why they don't really resize the way you want them to. So the second tip I wanted to focus on is remember what the colors mean. And again, as soon as we start using Tableau, we get them quite intuitively. And the blue and gray, I think everybody notices probably pretty much from maybe day one or day two. But then there is something else that I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here. There's quite a few colleagues who have talked in the community, not my colleagues, quite a few enthusiasts who have covered a lot more detail about what happens when you're dragging and dropping objects into a dashboard. And this is where, because it's so easy, and Tableau have made it so easy for us to drag and drop things, sometimes we can get lost into that. So I've given you here 5 kind of basic rules that are purely from my observation. It's nothing, there's no science. I haven't really talked to Tableau, so it is how exactly it works, but it might help you. So just to show you what I mean here, example for the hints of drag and dropping. Before I do the hints of drag and drop, I'll go back to the previous one. So when I said look at the colors, if you click on anything that says a vertical container on the left hand side, you can see it's a blue, it gives me this blue border around it. If you click on anything else, so such as the filter or maybe an actual chart, again, I don't know how well you can see it because it's screen sharing, but then this border becomes gray. So just again, keep an eye on that, but I think we all get comfortable with that very, very quickly. So what I mean about Tableau giving us hints when we drag and drop items or objects into the dashboard. I've got a few dashboard charts here. So the first row, or the first rule I've noticed is in a blank dashboard. Let me just clear this. In a blank dashboard, if I want to bring in an object, I can see how the space gets completely grayed out. So this is a gray filled area. And if I drop it, what's going to happen is the object is going to go inside. There's absolutely nothing else that you need to have a rule around. Is it going to go left or right or above or below something else? That's entirely what it is going to go straight in the middle because there's nothing else. And it's going to also create a new container. So let's check that again. I'm just going to go back, and you can see in my layout section, it's entirely empty here. I have nothing else. When I bring in my chart, I drag and drop it, and suddenly I've got my bar chart, and it has Tableau has created this tiled container for me because I have told it that every time I drag and drop an object, I want them to be nested in a particular way. And then what that way is depends really on the container. So that was the first rule. It's basically, if it's gray, completely gray filled area, it's going to go straight in the middle. The second rule I wanted to show you is if I bring in a container in a completely blank sheet. So again, we've got the blank sheet. I bring in a container again. I've got nothing else in there, so I get the gray screen. I've got my container. It's highlighted with a blue border. And I'm going to drop an object inside. So I'm going to drop my bar chart again. Now you can see I still have my dark gray screen, but now I have the border around it, which is telling me, okay, I've got a container and my object is going to go into that container and it's going to go bang in the middle because there's nothing else for it to kind of be aware of. It's going to go above, below, on the side, etc. So again, I've done this, check my layout structure. Here's a tiled container. This got created as soon as I brought in the horizontal one. And then there's my bar chart inside. Everything makes perfect sense because that's exactly how I expect it to behave. The third rule, let me just check the order I was trying to show them. Dark line with a slim shaded area on the side. So we have brought in this horizontal container, which means my objects are going to become aligned side by side in a horizontal way. And we have got this bar chart inside. Let's just bring another object. Again, it could be anything. It could even be a text box, a web page, etc. So once we have something inside a container, you can see we have a couple of more options. So I'm going to focus on this particular one. And as you can see, it's quite sensitive based on where exactly I move my mouse pointer. So as I start bringing it in, it keeps switching between these options. I think maybe I haven't even covered all the other possible options, but when I get to the dark blue outline with a slightly like a gray shaded area on the side, this is telling me this is going to go inside the container on the side of this particular object. So there we go. My table has gone inside the horizontal container next to the bar chart. And this is what I expected to see. This is what happened. And I've got a new vertical container for the filters and the color shades. The other rule I wanted to show you is if you bring in an object and you get this half shaded area on the side, whether it's on the side or whether it's on the top, this is going to bring the object on the same level as the container is. So now we have my bar chart inside the container, but then my table is next to the container, so they're kind of on the same level. And I think the last one I wanted to show you is where am I right now? So the last one I wanted to show you is dark outline with a dashed line. So this is the classical example where we want to bring something inside next to another chart. So when you've got more than one object, they're both inside the container. inside a horizontal container, and then we bring something else inside. Let's bring in a blank sheet, and we get this dashed line. This just means that it's going to go in the space in between these two objects. Simple as that. So moving on very, very swiftly. The tip 3 is adding structure, the earlier the better. Sometimes we all, nobody starts a dashboard knowing exactly how the objects are going to be aligned. And adding instructions from the very beginning might not always be appropriate, but once we have the idea clear, rearrange your object, and the sooner you start doing that, the easier it might be. For most of the time, as I said, there's more than one approach in doing so, especially if you're doing, let's say, a 4x4 or 2x2 grid. You can either start with horizontals or you can start with verticals. It's entirely up to you. The few tips that can help you doing that is coloring your containers. So that's number one. So color your containers just to make sure you know where objects are going into, arrange the objects, and then clear the colors. That's going to just give you an easy way of keeping track on where things are going. Bring the title, get rid of the unnecessary layers or containers. So this is something I like to do. So when I have a brand new worksheet, what I like to do is I like to clear this, and I just go for show me the dashboard title, and what this happens is it creates this very nice vertical container, and I can start bringing things in straight away. What I also do is I get rid of this tiled underneath. This is something else I like to do. Use a white space as a space holder. I'm not going to demonstrate this because a few more resources I can point you to show you how to do that at the end. And something else to do is wrote in a horizontal container by mistake, but now you need a vertical one. That is not a problem because containers like to have a slightly kind of shifty nature. And once you bring in a horizontal container, you bring in something else next to it, something else inside. And if you want to arrange an object, so it's horizontal, you want to bring in an object underneath it, you can do so, and it's just going to change from a horizontal to a vertical. Again, there's some fantastic resource out there which you can just see in more details. The tricky Tableau one is, again, I'm not going to demonstrate these more details, but if you cannot fix the width or the height of your objects, that's probably because you're either having a tiled container or because you have this distribute evenly option switched on. And I'm going to use my previous example. I have these two vertically aligned. I can fix the height here, fix height. But if I use the built-in option to do distribute evenly, and now I say, oh, I want to change the height using the precision, this option is just doesn't, it's not even grayed out, it just disappears. So keep an eye on that. It could be that this is the problem. Tricky Tableau 2 is how did I end up with extra tiled containers? That's very easy to happen. And very quickly, I'm going to show you how that works. If, for example, I have a horizontal container with a bar chart and a table next to it, and then I'm going to bring in another horizontal container right underneath it with another tree map and map number 2 next to it, and I say, oh, I want them to align properly. It is those little black arrows that can cause me headache afterwards. And that is because at the moment I've got my horizontal here and then horizontal here. As soon as I drag that around next to a line, I got a tiled container. Practice that and see what happens. So be careful with this. It really helps us align things, but it can cause us headache. And the last tricky Tableau is, why is the halo effect? You cannot align things perfectly, but suddenly you still have that white space around. This could be because, and I'm going to show you exactly in this slide, this is because you might be using this padding effect. This is something that was introduced again very, very recently. I think it was 10.4, and it's a very powerful feature, but it can, if you're not comfortable with this, practice it to get used to how it works, and then take it under your control. So keep an eye how much padding there is around your object. So that's the last of the tips. Some useful resources. There was one more, but I couldn't find the link to it. The quote is from Interworks blog post. Again, as I said, these links will be on my Tableau Public in a few minutes. And Tim Guana, he's done some 3 fantastic videos on, I think this one is 12 minutes, 18 minutes, and that's about 33 minutes, on literally step-by-step how to practice the blog post. Sorry, how to practice the containers. And my personal blog is here. I don't blog very often, but you can find something useful there sometimes. The last thing, that's my last slide, and what I wanted to say is thank you to the Tableau Fringe Festival EMEA for letting me speak. Tableau Fringe Festival stands as if it's for the community, from the community, for the community. I just wanted to ask you, just think about it. What was your Tableau training like when you started? Because mine was 2 hours with my manager when I started 3 years ago, and everything else was just blog posts, YouTube videos, webinars, and sessions face to face. So, and this always driven by community and delivered by the community. So this is me just trying to say thank you and hope you find that useful. So do please participate in such events. So that was literally bang on, I think 20 minutes. Not much time for Q&As, but I can take them afterwards after we hand over to the next speaker. So thank you very much, everyone. It's a very quick one, but we can do more demonstrations later on. Right, Q&As. How do you know if there's a possibility to move objects across containers through the layout view? No, I haven't seen that before. Yes, I haven't seen that before. I'd wish we could do that. I think I might even make an idea, or if you have made an idea in ideas forums, please, I'll vote that. I'll vote it up. Joanna, can you use the item hierarchy to add, remove dashboard elements from containers? So the item hierarchy, yes, you can use that. If I'm just going to demonstrate this in one of the dashboards, I can just dashboard elements. So I can just right click here, and then I can just remove it from the dashboard. You can do the same thing with the containers. Remove the container is going to remove the outline, and then everything is going to go one level above. Or if you go backwards, removing from the dashboard is going to completely remove everything inside. So this is where we get this very, very big message. Well, do you want to do that or not? And the last one, how do you avoid the blank space due to a blank container whose data is currently hidden? I think I'm going to answer it by text in a few minutes because I'm overrunning right now. So I'm going to, can I